We'll now take a moment to examine how the look-for-pattern strategy of problem solving can be applied to complex, multifaceted problems. Recall that the general idea behind the strategy of problem solving is to look for commonalities, trends, and connections, that is, patterns, within a set of data that can answer a question, support a judgment, or make a prediction. How do we do this? Well, first we collect good data about the population we're interested in studying. Then we use that data to calculate statistics. Our statistics can be used to identify trends in the data and also to calculate probabilities and make predictions about future events. Today we'll be examining the example of test scores. Test scores are an example that can show how looking for patterns at multiple scales and of multiple different types can help us to solve problems on an individual level all the way to a worldwide level. We'll first examine how test scores can be used by an individual teacher within a classroom to improve her students' performance in her teaching methods. How might she do this? Well, first she'll want to calculate some statistics on her students based on the test score data. She might look at mean and median to see what the typical student is doing, and she'll also want to look at variability to see how the students are doing in general and more broadly within the classroom. She could also compare the data in her classroom to that of other classrooms. She'll want to look at trends. These trends might include trends for a given student over the course of a year, for her class over the course of a year, and that may be in mean and median or in variability. And she'll want to look at trends from class to class over the course of years. By looking at these basic things, she could answer questions like, how much are individual students improving? Are some students improving more than others? Is there great variability among how the students are performing? She can also look at causality. She can look at what variables, such as race, the age of the student relative to the rest of the class, the gender of the student's initial test score, etc., might influence how the student performs over the course of the year. Once she's analyzed this information to exhaustion, she can then plan experiments to try to figure out how these variables, when manipulated, might influence and improve student performance. For example, she could alter variables such as the books that are used within the classroom, the labs the students do, the activities in which they partake in class, the daily schedule of things like class, snack time, recess, etc., and even disciplinary methods to see if these have a difference in make a difference to student learning. She could also look at relationships like gender, first language, and cultural background to determine whether these have an influence on student performance, and she could use these to make tailored lesson plans for her students. But this isn't just useful analysis for an individual teacher. This could also be applied to the district level. In a typical American school system, schools are divided into districts, so one administrative body oversees multiple schools. A district administrator could assess statistics such as mean and variability to try to determine how to improve the overall school system. For example, he could compare demographics among schools and assess the impact. Do scores go up and down with race, income, or diversity? And how do non-student factors play a role? Might teacher quality make a difference? What about teacher compensation? How about resources? Do some resources work better in some school systems than others? What makes a difference? How might the schedule of the school year or even school day influence student performance? Do students who start work earlier in the day perform better? What about students who attend school more days a year or for more hours in a day? What about students who have long vacations twice a year versus multiple short vacations within a year? And how might the distance of commute, such as the bus ride for students from a school, make a difference? Should the allocation of students within the town or the district by school change based on these variables? By analyzing this data, the district administrator can devise a strategy to advance the district. He can manipulate the causal variables in a positive direction, observe the results and trends of those manipulations, and then implement a tracking system for key metrics to determine when problems arise. Beyond the district level, schools are regulated at a national level across the country, mainly by providing financial support to various schools and implementing standards that schools need to meet to receive things like financial support or guidance from the national government. The government has different relationships with each state because states are given a lot of leverage in how to determine what to do with their school system. At the national level, administrators can look at similarities and differences among states, both in how they're treated by the national government and how they perform on tests. The national administrators can also look at what areas are uniform in terms of the need for improvement, and which areas may have specific needs for improvement that differ from other states. Based on this information, the national administrative body can look at how to allocate resources among the states most effectively to improve education overall for students across the country. They can create this strategy along a number of parameters. For example, they can determine whether to be hands-on, that is, actively becoming involved with organizations that help schools or being involved with schools themselves, or hands-off, simply giving money to the schools to figure out how to determine what to do with their school systems best. They can determine whether to create highly specific strategies or to mainly determine strategy based on the needs of an individual state. And they can look at whether they should implement programs for across-the-board improvement, that is, requiring each state to improve a certain amount, or to meet a minimum threshold among states, regardless of the individual state's starting point. Finally, test scores can be used to try to determine a global strategy both for education and for an individual nation. By comparing international test scores, that is, scores for the United States versus scores across the world, the United States could look at its areas of competitiveness. What are we good at compared to other countries? It could also compare strengths and weaknesses to the needs and strategic objectives of the country. For example, if the U.S. has a lot of natural resources, it'll want to make sure that it can take advantage of those natural resources by making sure that its education system emphasizes science and mathematics enough to produce enough engineers in order to be able to harness the resources with domestic companies. And it'll want to benchmark experience based on what other countries have done to try to experiment with district, state, and national improvement schemes and to determine whether they work well or not well for the U.S. Based on test score data from international schools, a strategy can be created to match areas needing improvement to solutions from research and to determine metrics for tracking success. Are scores more important or other outcomes? How should this information be tracked? Even basic statistics, looking at variability, means and medians, and overall population parameters, can be used to implement these programs. As you can see, statistics is a very powerful tool for solving complex problems, even if one is not an advanced statistician.